In this lesson, I'll demonstrate how to reseed a failed mailbox database copy for an Exchange Server 2010 database availability group. So picking up from the last scenario where my server SeedEx4 suffered a failure, we noticed that mailbox database 2 was able to fail over to SeedEx3, where it's in a mounted state. Now SeedEx4 has been recovered. However, we look here and we see that the copy status is actually in a failed state. So you might imagine that when the server had its failure, one of the disks failed, and that disk stored the database copy for mailbox database 2. Now that disk has been replaced, but of course it doesn't have any data on it anymore. So at the moment the mailbox database is still mounted. It was able to fail over to SeedEx3 and remain online there, so clients are still able to access their mailboxes. But we no longer have high availability for that mailbox database because its only other copy, which is supposed to be on SeedEx4, is in this failed state. So what we need to do is get a mailbox database copy back onto SeedEx4. And we do that through a process called reseeding. The first step is to suspend database copy. So even though it's already in a failed state, we need to suspend it so that the mailbox servers are aware that they should no longer or temporarily not try to replicate more data to that server. And that puts the database copy in this failed and suspended state. The next step is to update the database copy. So let's take a quick look first at SeedEx4, and we can see that even though mailbox database 1 is still there, mailbox database 2 is not. So this is very similar to that original process of creating the mailbox database in the first place. So we can start this database copy update process. And here we are choosing to update mailbox database 2 on SeedEx4. There is an optional setting here to select a source server to seed that from. That's useful if you have a database availability group with more than 2 members. So there may be a source server within the DAG that is actually closer in terms of network connectivity to the failed copy, and that would be the one that would be more efficient to choose as the source server for seeding. But in this case it's only a 2 server database availability group, so I don't have to choose a source server at all. And in fact, if you leave this tick box unticked, it will go to whichever server is the active copy of that mailbox database at the time. And similarly, you can choose a database availability group network to use for seeding. I've only got one available, one replication network available, so again I don't need to choose anything special there. Be aware also that there is a setting here that if the files already exist in the target path, say for example if the database copy became corrupt or just out of sync and was not able to be kept up to date by the Exchange server, this option just makes sure that whichever files are already there are deleted before the update continues. And the final option here is to choose what to do with database replication after the update process is successful. And the default option is to automatically resume data replication from the active database copy. However, in some circumstances you may wish to leave replication suspended, perhaps so that you can do some further diagnostic or remediation work. So just to recap, I'm making a copy of mailbox database 2 to SeedEx4, and all these other settings I'm fine with the defaults. Click the update button to begin that process. Let's have a look back at SeedEx4 now. We can see this temp seeding folder has returned. So again, that's very similar to that initial process of creating the mailbox database copy. The update database copy wizard has completed successfully. I can click on finish. We can see on CDX4 the database file is there. Transaction log files are there. Back on CDX3, database is currently in this resynchronizing state. And as we refresh that, we can watch that copy queue decrease. And now Mailbox Database 2, the copy on CDX4 is back in a healthy state again. So we've successfully reseeded that database copy to the server that suffered the hardware failure.